In November 2023, a conservation team at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad carefully opened a sealed wooden crate labelled Tel al-Hiba, unclassified material. Inside were 9 salt-crusted clay tablets. 8 were grain records. The 9th was larger, denser, 3 columns of cuneiform on both sides. When epigraphist Ali al-Hashimi completed the first column, he assumed his transliteration contained an error. The text was not a hymn, it was not accounting, it was a numbered set of instructions, 5 of them, for extending human life. And the instructions match, point by point, what longevity science began documenting only 50 years ago. The crate had been logged in 1968 and never opened. The excavations at Tel al-Hiba, the modern name for the ancient Sumerian city of Lagash, were cut short by political crisis, and the recovered material was shipped to Baghdad, sealed, and placed in basement storage. It stayed there through 3 wars, the looting of 2003, and the flooding of the lower levels in 2015. The label read unclassified material. For 55 years, no one classified it. In November 2023, a joint Iraqi-Italian restoration team working through the museum's backlog reached the crate. Inside were 9 clay tablets in standard condition, fragmented, salt-crusted, partial preservation. Conservator Marco de Gregorio began the cleaning. 8 of the 9 tablets were exactly what the storage context predicted. Grain accounting, labour allocation, temple supply lists, the administrative residue of a Bronze Age city, valuable to specialists, invisible to everyone else. The 9th tablet was different. It was larger than the others, nearly twice the thickness, and the cuneiform was arranged in 3 dense columns on both sides. Administrative tablets from this period rarely carry text on the reverse. This one used every available surface. De Gregorio spent 11 days removing the salt layer from the obverse. When the first column emerged, he photographed it and sent the images to Ali al-Hashimi, an epigraphist with the Iraqi State Board of Antiquities, who began preliminary transliteration that same evening. Al-Hashimi expected a hymn. The opening sign cluster resembled formulas found in temple dedications, but by the 4th line the structure had broken from every known pattern. There was no invocation, there was no god named, there was no king praised. The text announced itself with a phrase that has no exact parallel in the published Sumerian corpus, Namtila ud Sudida, which translates as life of lengthened days. Not eternal life, not divine life, the distinction matters. Sumerian literature is full of texts about immortality, the Gilgamesh tradition being the most famous, and all of them treat unending life as the property of gods permanently denied to humans. This text made no such claim. It did not promise escape from death. It promised more days before it. A measured, earthbound, achievable extension. That framing alone placed the tablet outside every existing category. Al-Hashimi worked through the first column over 3 nights. What he found was not narrative and not myth. It was structure. The text was organized as a numbered sequence. The Sumerian numerical determinatives were unambiguous, 1 through 5. Each number introduced a block of 11 lines. Each block followed the same internal pattern, an instruction, a stated quantity or interval, and an observed outcome, instruction, dose, result. Al-Hashimi had read thousands of tablets. He had never seen a literary or religious text built on that skeleton. He had seen it in exactly one other genre, administrative records. The format of a scribe trained to document grain shipments, applied to the human body. The text also identified its own source. The second column opened with a line Al-Hashimi translated as the Council of the Fathers, gathered by the Azou of the temple, tested upon the living. The term Azou is well attested. It means physician, literally the one who knows the water, and it appears across Mesopotamian medical texts. But those texts are diagnostic. Symptom lists, omens, incantations against disease. This was not diagnosis, this was prevention. And the phrase tested upon the living implied something no scholar has been comfortable saying out loud. Observation. Practices applied across a population, outcomes recorded, results compiled. The tablet claimed to be a distillation, not revelation from a god. Accumulated data from generations of physician priests reduced to 5 instructions that survived the filtering. How many generations? The text gives a number. It states that the council was gathered across a period the scribe recorded as Mushar, and 1 shar in the sexagesimal system equals 3,600. Al-Hashimi initially read the figure as ceremonial exaggeration, the way royal inscriptions inflate reign lengths. But the rest of the tablet is not ceremonial. It is clinical. Quantities are exact, intervals are counted in days and lunar months. A scribe precise enough to specify measures of barley to the sila, roughly 1 litre, does not casually inflate his source citation. Either the number is symbolic or the tradition behind the tablet claimed to be older than the city that wrote it down. There was one more structural anomaly, and it is the one that kept Al-Hashimi at his desk past dawn on the third night. Each of the 5 numbered blocks ends with the same repeated line, a kind of refrain. The line reads, "He who keeps this walks to grey hair. He who abandons it is counted early." Counted early, the verb is the one used in census documents. In the administrative vocabulary of Lagash, to be counted meant to be entered in the record of the dead for that year. The scribe was describing mortality. He was describing it the only way his training allowed, through the language of accounting. People who followed the instructions appeared in the death registers later. People who did not appeared sooner. The tablet was not offering wisdom, it was reporting a differential. Al-Hashimi finished the preliminary transliteration of the first column in early December 2023. He called to Gregorio and told him the tablet needed priority conservation for the second and third columns, and he said, according to de Gregorio's later account, one sentence that de Gregorio wrote down: "This is not a religious text, this is a study." The cleaning of the second column took another 2 weeks. The salt crust was thicker there, and the surface beneath it was better preserved, which meant that when the first of the 5 numbered instructions finally emerged, it emerged nearly intact. 41 legible lines. Al-Hashimi transliterated the first instruction in a single sitting. Then he sat with it for 2 days without telling anyone what it said. Not because the reading was uncertain, the signs were clear. He sat with it because the instruction contradicted everything assumed about Bronze Age medicine, everything assumed about what a culture without laboratories could know about the human body. The first instruction was not about herbs, it was not about incantations, it was not about offerings to any god. It concerned something so ordinary that no one would have thought to look for it on a clay tablet, and it prescribed that ordinary thing with a precision that would not appear in medical literature again for 4,000 years. The instruction was about when to eat, not what, when, and the tablet had counted the days of the men who ignored it. The first instruction occupies 41 lines, and its core is a single command the scribe repeats 3 times in identical form. Eat within the arc of the sun. The Sumerian phrase is ugu udda, literally food inside the day. The instruction specifies that a man should take his first food when the sun stands 1 hand above the horizon and his last before the sun touches the western edge. Nothing after dark. The text is explicit about the exception, and the exception is what makes the passage read like protocol rather than proverb. Night eating is permitted for the sick, for women with child, and for men returning from campaign. Everyone else is bound. The tablet even quantifies the boundary. It states that the mouth should be closed for a span the scribe records as 2 watches and a half, the Mesopotamian night being divided into 3 watches of 4 hours. 2.5 watches is 10 hours. Add the hours of darkness before dawn and the interval without food approaches 14 hours. A daily fasting window dosed in watches. The instruction goes further. 4 times in each lunar month on days the text ties to the moon's quarters, the tablet prescribes a full day on water, thin beer and nothing else. The phrase is kakesh dar, the bound mouth. The outcome line for this instruction states that the man who eats inside the day keeps the strength of his middle years into grey hair, and that the man who fills himself in darkness grows heavy, sleeps badly, and is counted early. Not ritual purity, not sacrifice, not appeasement of any god, a feeding schedule. The modern mirror is difficult to look away from. Time-restricted eating entered mainstream metabolic research in the 2010s, when studies at the Salk Institute demonstrated that confining food intake to a daylight-aligned window of 8 to 12 hours improved glucose regulation, lipid profiles and lifespan markers in animal models, results later extended to human trials. The mechanism runs through circadian biology. Insulin sensitivity peaks in the morning and collapses at night. Identical meals produce worse blood glucose responses after dark. The 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine went to the researchers who mapped the molecular clock underlying this rhythm. The tablet's exception list is the detail Al-Hashimi finds hardest to dismiss. Modern clinical guidance exempts the same 3 groups, the the ill, the pregnant, the acutely stressed, from fasting protocols. A Bronze Age scribe recorded the exemptions 4,000 years before the contraindications were written. The second instruction begins at line 42 of the second column, and it concerns a preparation the text calls Kash Nam Ti La, the beer of life. The name is misleading to a modern reader. The text describes something closer to a fermentation regimen than a drink. The instruction directs that barley and dates be soaked, crushed, and left in covered clay vessels until the mixture turns, the verb being the one used for milk becoming sour, and that every person in the household take a measure of the living result each day. The dose is specified, 1 seela daily, roughly 1 litre, taken with the morning meal. The text distinguishes this preparation from ordinary beer by a single determinative, the sign for life appended to the sign for brew, and it insists on a detail that no ritual explanation accounts for. The vessel must not be heated. The text says heat kills the small workers. The phrase Al-Hashimi circled in his notes is Lu tur tusha kashe, the tiny ones inside the brew. The tiny ones inside the brew, a scribe with no lens, no microscope, no germ theory, recording that a fermented preparation contains living agents, that those agents are destroyed by heat, and that their daily consumption is tied to long life. The outcome line states that the household that keeps the beer of life suffers less from the loosening of the bowels, the wasting fevers, and the swelling sickness, and that its old men keep their teeth. The modern mirror has a name, the microbiome. Fermented foods carrying live cultures, yogurt, kefir, traditional beers, unheated ferments of grain and fruit populate the gut with bacteria now linked to immune regulation, reduced inflammation, and protection against exactly the conditions the tablet lists: diarrheal disease, infection, inflammatory swelling. A 2021 Stanford study found that a 10-week diet of fermented foods measurably increased gut microbial diversity and lowered 19 inflammatory markers in blood. The insistence that the vessel stay unheated is the point where coincidence strains. Pasteurization destroys probiotic cultures. Modern labels say live and active cultures for the same reason the tablet said the tiny ones must not meet fire. The observation is identical, only the vocabulary is 4,000 years apart. There is a pattern worth stating plainly because the tablet itself states it. Each instruction ends with its census line, its differential, followed by a number. For the first instruction the number is 6 shushi, and for the second it is 5 shushi. 1 shushi is 60. Al-Hashimi's reading, which he has not published, is that these are cohort figures, the count of households observed under each practice. 360 households for the feeding schedule, 300 for the fermented preparation. If that reading is correct, the tablet is not merely recording advice, it is recording sample sizes. The Azou of Lagash were not guessing. They were counting, in the only institution on Earth at that time that had scribes, records, and a population large enough to count. The temple was the laboratory. The city was the study. Al-Hashimi transliterated the second instruction in late December 2023 and sent both blocks, under confidentiality, to a colleague at the University of Pennsylvania, a specialist in Mesopotamian medical texts. The colleague's reply, which Al-Hashimi has shown to 2 people, contained one sentence that has since circulated among the 4 scholars who know the tablet. If this text is genuine, the history of medicine has the wrong first chapter. The colleague also flagged a problem. Instructions 1 and 2 concern food, and food leaves traces in the archaeological record that could, in principle, be checked against skeletal remains from Lagash. Instructions 3, 4 and 5, the colleague warned, would be harder to verify and easier to dismiss. He was wrong about the dismissal. The third instruction is the one that months later would make a cardiologist reviewing the translation go silent because it prescribes a daily dose of something modern medicine did not quantify until the 20th century, and it prescribes it in units that can be converted, checked and confirmed. The scribe wrote it in 11 lines. The salt crust over those lines was the thinnest on the tablet. They emerged almost perfectly preserved, as if the clay itself had decided which part of the record mattered most. The third instruction is 11 lines, and it prescribes walking. The Sumerian phrase is gir gub ba udda, the foot set upon the day. The instruction directs that every man and woman not confined by sickness walk the boundary path of their district each morning and each evening, and it defines the distance. The text specifies 30 ninda in the morning and 30 ninda at dusk. 1 ninda is approximately 6 meters. 60 ninda is roughly 360 meters, but the text adds that the circuit is to be walked 10 times, gi ninnu, and the arithmetic lands at 7,200 meters per day. The cardiologist who reviewed al-Hashimi's translation in the spring of 2024, a consultant in Berlin who was asked not to be named, converted the figure into steps. At an average stride, 7,200 meters is between 9,000 and 10,000 steps. He went silent, al-Hashimi says, for most of a minute. The 10,000 step benchmark entered modern culture through a Japanese pedometer marketed in 1965, and for decades it was dismissed as advertising. Then the cohort studies arrived. A 2020 JAMA analysis of 4,840 adults found that participants taking 8,000 to 12,000 steps daily had roughly half the all-cause mortality of those taking 4,000. The dose-response curve flattens near 10,000. The tablet's outcome line states the same curve in census language. The man whose foot keeps the day is counted late. The man who sits is counted early, and before he's counted, his legs are taken from him. Al-Hashimi reads that final clause as the earliest written description of sarcopenia, the muscle wasting of the sedentary old. The text even names the mechanism, the only way it can, the body that stops, dries. The fourth instruction concerns darkness. The phrase is gi una izi nu, no flame in the night. The instruction directs that all lamps in the household be extinguished by the end of the first watch, 4 hours after sunset, and that sleep be taken in full darkness until the sky pales. It forbids what the scribe calls eating the night with fire, staying awake by lamplight. The exception list returns: watchmen, midwives attending a birth, and priests keeping a required vigil. Everyone else sleeps dark. The outcome line links the practice to the mind rather than the body. The text says the man who sleeps in darkness keeps his memory into grey hair, rises without heaviness, and does not fall to the trembling sadness. The trembling sadness. The phrase appears nowhere else in the published corpus. The 4 scholars have privately debated whether it denotes depression, dementia, or both. The modern mirror is circadian science again, but from the other side of the clock. Light at night suppresses melatonin, causes deep sleep, and has been linked in cohort studies to obesity, diabetes, depression, and cognitive decline. A 2022 study of 88,000 UK biobank participants tied nighttime light exposure to elevated risk of psychiatric disorders. Sleep researchers now prescribe exactly what the tablet prescribes: darkness, on a schedule, screens and flames extinguished hours before rest. The Sumerians had one artificial light source, the oil lamp, and their physicians had already measured its cost. The 5th instruction is the shortest, 9 lines, and it is the only one the scribe frames with anything resembling emotion. It commands that no man eat alone, that the old sit among the young at the evening meal, and that every person past their 40th year be given a duty in the household or the temple, a reason the text calls the rope that pulls the morning. The instruction ends with the line al-Hashimi has translated and retranslated 11 times because he distrusts how modern it sounds. A man alone withers like a reed pulled from the marsh. Plant him among others and he stands. The mirror here is the largest body of evidence of all. The Harvard study of adult development, running since 1938, identified relationship quality as the strongest single predictor of late life health, ahead of cholesterol, ahead of wealth. A 2015 meta-analysis covering 3.4 million participants found that loneliness and social isolation raised mortality risk by 26 to 32%, an effect comparable to smoking. The Blue Zone's research, the study of the world's longevity clusters in Okinawa, Sardinia, and Ikaria, isolated the same variables the tablet lists: communal meals, integration of the old, and a named purpose, what Okinawans call ikigai, and what a Lagash scribe called the rope that pulls the morning. Stand back from the 5 instructions and the pattern is no longer deniable. Time-restricted eating, live fermented foods, 10,000 steps, dark sleep, social bonds and purpose. In 2024, any preventive medicine department in the world would rank these among the strongest lifestyle interventions on record. Modern science required a century of cohort studies randomized trials and molecular biology to isolate the 5 from the noise of 10,000 folk remedies, the tablet contains no noise, no amulets, no incantations, no crushed scorpions, no prayers to Gula, the goddess of healing who dominates every other Mesopotamian medical text. 5 instructions, only the 5 that replicate. That absence is the finding. Every traditional medical corpus, Egyptian, Greek, Chinese, Mesopotamian, mixes effective practice with ritual and error. The filtering is what took humanity 4,000 years. Whoever compiled this tablet had already done the filtering, and the tablet tells us how. The Azou tradition. Temple physicians in a city of tens of thousands, attached to the one institution that recorded births, deaths, rations, and years, generation after generation. The scribe describes the method in a single devastating line near the end of the 3rd column. The fathers watched and wrote, and their sons compared the tablets of the dead. Their sons compared the tablets of the dead. Picture the room. A junior Azou in the temple archive of Lagash, lamplit despite his own 4th instruction, laying census tablets side by side. Households that kept the bound mouth against households that did not. Ages at death in one column, practices in another. No statistics, no mathematics of probability. Only patience measured in lifetimes and a bureaucracy meticulous enough to make the comparison possible. Observational epidemiology, conducted in clay, centuries before Hippocrates was born. The question the tablet raises but cannot answer is scale. The cohort numbers, 360 households here, 300 there, imply a formal program. The citation of the fathers implies duration. A single line in the damaged final column, only partly legible, appears to reference tablets of the council held in other cities, and al-Hashimi can make out one city name, Nippur. If the reading stands, Lagash was not the archive. It was one node of a network, and the rest of the corpus, the raw data of the first long study of human life, is still in the ground. Then in June 2024, the tablet was taken away. The removal was administrative, not dramatic. In June 2024, the Iraqi State Board of Antiquities reclassified the Lagash tablet under Restricted Access Category 2, a designation reserved for objects of national heritage, significance requiring ministerial approval for study. A tablet from an unclassified crate stored in a flooded basement for 55 years, elevated to the same security tier as the Walker vase. Al-Hashimi was informed that further work would require a formal research application, reviewed by a committee that meets twice per year. His photographs were requested to be removed from all personal and institutional devices. His compliance is unknown. The reclassification followed a specific sequence, and the sequence is worth recording. In January 2024, al-Hashimi shared the full transliteration with 3 colleagues, one at the University of Pennsylvania, one at SOAS in London, one at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. The Pennsylvania colleague proposed joint publication in the Journal of Cuneiform Studies. The SOAS colleague asked for high-resolution photographs of the tablet itself before committing to any assessment, a reasonable request, since the field has been burned before by texts that existed only as transliterations. The Munich colleague did not respond for 6 weeks, then sent a brief email stating that publication would be premature and that the tablet required independent physical verification. 3 scholars, 3 postures, enthusiasm, caution, silence. In March 2024, al-Hashimi submitted a preliminary paper to the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. It was returned without review. The stated reason was procedural. The journal does not accept submissions based on unpublished artifacts lacking institutional verification. Standard gatekeeping. Not unusual, not sinister. But 3 months later came the reclassification, and with it the practical impossibility of the verification the journal required. The tablet cannot be published without institutional access. Institutional access now requires ministerial approval. The loop is closed. No one needs a conspiracy to explain this. The distinction matters. Iraq has watched its heritage looted, forged, and sensationalized for decades, and a tablet that appears to anticipate modern medicine is exactly the kind of object that attracts forgers' reputations and tabloid coverage. A cautious ministry locks such an object away. A cautious scholar declines to attach his name. A cautious journal returns the paper. Every actor behaves rationally, and the combined result of all that rational caution is a text that no one can read, no one can test, and no one can cite. Skepticism deserves its full hearing. The tablet has not been dated by thermoluminescence. The transliteration exists only in private files. The chain of custody, a crate unopened since 1968, is precisely the kind of gap a sophisticated forgery would exploit. The counter-argument is the crate itself. Its seals were documented on opening. Its contents were salt-crusted in a manner consistent with the 2015 flood, and a forger capable of composing 200 lines of grammatically flawless Sumerian, structured as cohort epidemiology, dosed in authentic Bronze Age units that convert to modern clinical values, would be the most learned forger in history. Either reading is extraordinary. That is the problem. There is no ordinary explanation left. So the questions stand where the evidence stops. If the Azou of Lagash ran a multi-generational observational study of human longevity, the question is what happened to the tradition that built it. If the Nippur reference is real, the question is how many tablets of the council lie unread in museum basements and unexcavated mounds, catalogued as unclassified material. If 5 instructions survived the filtering, the question is what the other tablets recorded and discarded, and whether anything was found that we have not yet found again. Sumerian medicine is conventionally described as magic with fragments of empiricism. This tablet, if genuine, inverts the description. The magic came later. The empiricism came first and was lost. The scribe himself claims nothing. He does not name a god, he does not promise immortality. He records a method. The fathers watched and wrote, and their sons compared the tablets of the dead. He lists 5 practices, their doses, their exceptions, their outcomes, and their cohorts, in the same hand and the same format his colleagues used for barley. He was not writing scripture, he was filing a report. He filed it in a city that fell, in a language that died, in a crate that waited 55 years in a basement that flooded twice, and the report survived all of it. 8 tablets of grain accounts around it. 1 tablet of accumulated human observation among them. The ratio is probably honest. Most of what any civilization writes down is grain accounts. 4 people have read the full transliteration, none have published. The tablet sits in Baghdad under a catalogue number that has not been publicly assigned. The committee that could grant access meets twice per year. Meanwhile, the 5 instructions themselves are not locked anywhere. They are confirmed independently in the modern literature, in JAMA and in Stanford microbiome trials, and in 80 years of the Harvard study, rediscovered piece by piece by researchers who never heard of Lagash. Eat within the arc of the sun, keep the living drink from the fire, set the foot upon the day, put out the lamp, do not eat alone and hold a rope that pulls the morning. Nothing esoteric, nothing hidden. The knowledge was never the secret. The secret is that we had it, counted and proven 4,000 years ago, and forgot, and spent a century of science walking back to a door a Bronze Age physician had already marked. The tablet is in Baghdad. The record, as the scribe intended, survives.